Hi, I'm Yolanda and this is Speak On. On today's episode, I'm asking, how the fuck do we save the planet? And the lucky person answering the question is comedian, environmental economist, the host of the podcast Operation Earth, and the author of the book Hot Mess, What on Earth Can We Do About Climate Change? Dr. Matt Winning. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Yolanda. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. How are you doing? How's your day been? How are things in
good.
Matt's world?
Good. I mean, climate change is very much still happening, so pretty busy.
Yes.
And sort of balancing working on climate change and being a new dad. And those two things are quite mostly fun. I don't know. The new dad thing's pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
The climate change thing can be not fun, but it's important. Both of them give life a lot of meaning. There we go. That's what I'll say.
Yes. So first of all, what inspired you to make climate change the focus for your comedy?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the simplest answer that most people would expect is me to be like, I really cared about climate change, so I thought I'm gonna do this thing that someone else didn't. What actually happened was that I'd been doing comedy for about 8 years, and I'd been working on climate change for about 9 years at that time. So this was, about 5 years ago. So I'd been working on doing both of those things separately for almost a decade, and I mostly was doing comedy so that I didn't have to think about climate change in the evenings.
Yeah.
So it was like another thing where I was like, this is nothing to do with what I actually do. And then I got a really bad review saying that I didn't really talk about much in my comedy. So I decided to write a lecture about climate change and see if that was, I was like, if you want something heavy, I'll give you an hour of this. And then I did it, and it actually went really well. And I was like, oh, actually, this makes a lot of sense. Why it makes sense to try to talk about a subject that's difficult to talk about in a way that's more accessible to people, in a way that's, I guess, a bit more balanced, because life is, as well as being difficult, it's funny, and we cope, have to find ways of coping with difficult subjects and all that sort of stuff. So I actually found that it was a really good way to talk about it. And so I sort of stumbled across it by surprise. I don't know whether I'm thankful for that bad review or not. Probably good that they gave me. I mean, it still hurts getting bad reviews for comedy, but it's probably a good thing, because it's meant that I've completely changed my tact, and I get a lot of, I get a lot out of doing comedy about something that sort of feels like it has a purpose and can inform people and that sort of thing. So
I suppose, so sometimes it's that constructive feedback, let's call it in air quotes. Yeah. That it can help sometimes. I suppose it kind of just it realigned you slightly, just shifted your course just enough, and then you found by marrying your two worlds.
Exactly. It made my life so much simpler in the sense that it meant that everything that I did was focused on climate change, but it also made my life very focused on climate change.
Yes.
Which means I don't really get an escape from it. Basically, I'm talking about it sort of 24/7, which again is good, but also it's difficult to get a break.
Yeah.
I need one TV show that I watch in the evening just to be like, right, I have to not think about this for an hour or whatever.
What show do you watch to do that, to help you with that?
I mean, there's loads of different ones. Anything that's like I can just keep going with it that lasts a while. At the moment, I'm watching Call My Agent on Netflix. It's like a French comedy. It's really good. Everybody needs that sort of.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't be thinking all the time about heavy things, but we need to think about heavy things as well.
Yes.
It's like, how much of your brain do you let occupy the difficult stuff? And I'm sure some people go in the other direction and are like, I'll just not let any of the difficult stuff in, or think of, which is, but the people that are listening to your podcast, clearly they're the folk that are like, we want to.
They like a bit of a mixture. We like to mix it up. Sometimes we have something that's really serious, and sometimes it's BDSM. It's really mix it up. Could be anything happening. And I get it. I do anti-racism education, which is so heavy. So my what I do to get out of that is watch every single bit of the Real Housewives franchise.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just
I mean,
so much of it.
that's what I have a number of friends who also do that exact thing, which is like, yeah, Real Housewives. I just watch that. And
Yeah,
it means
exactly.
I don't have to think about anything, and then you
No.
go back to whatever it is that you do.
Basically, yeah. But yeah, it's a nice way to take the edge off slightly. So, okay, so now we're getting on to the serious stuff.
Okay.
Here we go. What state is the planet in, really?
Okay, good question. The planet is not in a great state whatsoever. It's in a different state, so it's changing, hence why we talk about climate change. So the planet is rapidly changing. It's changing it's certainly changing faster than humans have ever experienced it changing before, and it's changing because of humans as well. The planet's fine. Like, the planet can cope. The planet has been warmer and colder. That's fine. But we often talk about it as like the planet, but it's really who lives on the planet that will be impacted really in a way that, you know, is out with our comfort zones. So we've warmed the planet by about 1 degree Celsius already, just from all the kind of fossil fuels and other greenhouse gases that we've burnt over since the Industrial Revolution, so over the last sort of 150, 200 years. But we're now burning more than humanity's really ever burned before as well. You know, it's just been going up and up and up, and the amount every year that we're adding is pretty much, you know, give or take the odd dip, like during COVID and stuff like that. But even then, it's still really high. You know, the emissions every year are really high. So we're adding more and more and more, and the planet's warming more. So we've warmed by about 1 degree. Where we end up is really still open to, you know, the future isn't set yet, but we're already seeing quite dramatic changes across the world, and that's impacting people in lots of different places, and it's really impacting the poorest people across the world as well, because it just sort of happens that they often live in the places that are most affected by climate change, which is sort of a kind of horrible irony of it. And they're the people that are kind of causing this issue the least. Now, we are doing some stuff about it. We've sort of started. So I think we're the probability of us ending up on like the absolute worst case sort of scenarios where people are like, you know, we're all going to go extinct, all that sort of stuff, I think that's unlikely. You know, the probability of that's reduced a lot because we've started acting on it. We've started, you know, using more renewables essentially thus far. We know that there's a problem. And so it's really about how much we and how quickly we decide to act as to how much kind of suffering there is over the coming, over the coming decades, but this is going to last for thousands of years. You know, the sea is going to rise for thousands of years, and I don't think people quite understand that.
They don't understand what that means.
What that means, and why it's a difficult thing to do. You know, why it's a difficult thing to deal with, and the different types of people that will be affected across the world by that is.
So the future could be, I don't know, Mad Max or Waterworld.
Yeah. I always say, the future might be like the film Waterworld. Terrible.
That's exactly. I was about to say, just awful.
Really bad. Yeah. And Kevin Costner's in charge. I don't know. No, who was it that was in charge? It was Dennis Hopper.
Oh, it was Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
Yes, with his just he was little cool, tiny pirate.
Sort of Mad Max Waterworld is like I think what we would say is it's less likely that that's the world we're going to end up in, which is good. That's the good news.
Yeah.
But some people will still end up in a pretty shitty world.
Yes.
And it will be a lot of the poorest people in the world that will be in that. So it's like, and what's going to happen to those people on those communities, and who's helping them, and how's that? You know, there's loads of these kind of open-ended questions there. So it's a pretty depressing topic to talk about, but obviously it's a conversation that
needs to be had.
And there was the day that we're recording this, which, well, we don't need to give a date, but there was a poll that came out. I can't remember if it was Ipsos Mori or who it was, but saying that climate change is now the top concern in Britain amongst people. And so people, I think people really do care about this, but it's how do we start having conversations about it? It's seen as like an environmental issue. It's not. It's a humanitarian issue. It affects.
Yeah. There's a kind of a real cognitive dissonance and a real disassociation with the environment, because people really do see it as something outside of a city or something outside of themselves. And I think obviously particularly with the past few years lockdown, people becoming more reflective, etc., they're really and introspective, they're really looking at the future in a different way. And it also made everyone pay attention not only to racism and misogyny and everything else. They were like, oh, half of the world is on fire as well. Because it was like, then, you know, the next thing you know, it's like, not only did we have killer hornets, we also, you know, we're seeing huge parts of New York under, like, you know, flooded, and things that people don't necessarily think, I suppose they may get buried in a normal news cycle. And so some people just didn't realize it was happening. And it's, you know, people have seen 2012 and they've seen The Day After Tomorrow and The Core and all these other things. People really think it's something so separate and out of a film, but it's like, no, that's kind of now. It's like these films are basically now.
It's never as dramatic as the films, but it's pretty much the truth. You know, it's just the problem is that it happens so slowly that we're not really, as humans, designed to deal with dangers that happen so slowly. We're designed to deal with fires that are you know, so wildfires are quite a thing that get a lot of attention, and people can see, you know, when they happened in Australia the other year, the massive ones, it's quite an emotional thing, and it's a danger that we understand. But like the sea level rising by 6 millimeters every year isn't something that you're noticing, and therefore it doesn't feel like a danger to you, even though it is. It's a danger to you know, and it affects people all across the world, and will mean massive, you know, changes. You know, I think you know, the sorts of numbers we're talking about are like on the rough trajectory that we're on at the moment, which is maybe like a 3-degree temperature rise. We're talking about something like, I think one number was about 275 million people that live near, you know, coasts that would be displaced by that. So that's like, what are we talking about? 5 times the size of the UK. Is there a country? Wow. I mean, even the United States is what, like maybe 300, 400 million. So you're talking about almost the entire population of the United States. Oh my goodness! Being their homes no longer existing, and then people having to move elsewhere, or how, you know, or and the jobs that they have change, you know. And so what does that do to the planet? As you know, and human civilization, so much unrest will happen. Yeah. So, you know, that's the scale of what we're trying to avoid here, but it's not like that's going to happen overnight, like in The Day After Tomorrow, where it's like, okay, now you don't live here. It's like, it's all really like slow moving, and that's why it's like really kind of boring for a lot of people, but it is so important. So it's sort of, you know, finding ways to talk about this and to get people, I think people have to understand, there is like a certain level that you have to understand the science or the impacts and what's going to happen, but you don't need to know it like inside out. You don't need to be, you know, an absolute expert on this, but you just have to understand like why it's happening, what the you know, roughly what's going on, and then it's like, okay, right, we need to solve this. And I think most people that do go through that sort of understanding of what's going on then come out going, okay, right, how do we go about change? And that's the conversation that's really important to have. I think like we mentioned those disaster films, which is like a switch flicks and everyone on the planet is fucked. And obviously that you're saying that's not what this scenario is, but when you are living in places that are impacted, it is like the switch flicks and you're fucked. But because we're not seeing it, say, from London or New York, or you know, well, New York had a lot of flooding, or certain places where we're not seeing that big weather impacts. And I have family that live in Texas, for example. Texas truly had every season in like
in a minute, and then electricity went down for like, it was like a month. They didn't have electricity for. Then it was like literally people were freezing in their homes. It was insane. That it was truly like apocalyptic kind of feeling.
And these sort of weird weather events and the much more extreme things are going to become more common, and the people that are always impacted the most are the people that can't deal with it, or the people that are with
my family were like, they had money, they just left.
Exactly.
So, they were like, this it wasn't great for us. We just went.
We went.
Yeah.
And so some people, and some people can't just go, or their jobs are the temperatures are increasing in a lot of places, whether it is sub-Saharan Africa or South America, where people work outside and it's getting hotter, and they either have to stop working outside, or they start getting kidney diseases because they're not getting in, they're working in temperatures that they shouldn't be working in and stuff like that. So it's this sort of the problem is that we've built our society globally on the climate that has always existed for humans, which is a sensible thing to do, because you're like, well, this is what this is what the world is. This is roughly the sort of boundaries, upper and lower boundaries, the sort of what we're used to. So this is how we'll build our society. It gets warm in these years, it gets cold, whatever. And now we've just sort of like very quickly sort of flicked a switch where we've gone like, okay, this is all changing, and who's ready for that change? And we're still building stuff. We're still building houses, even in this country, in the UK. We're still building houses that are not designed for the world that is going to exist in the future. And so and it'll be people that then won't be able to deal with that, elderly people that will be like, well, my house is too hot, or and it wasn't designed for this, because construction companies or whatever aren't interested in
future proofing, essentially.
Exactly. Future proofing. And so, but we don't know how much the future is going to change. So how much do you future proof? And if we actually do something about it now, we don't need to future proof as much, because we've stopped. So it's this sort of tricky like thing where the future isn't set, but it is 100% within our control as to what happens.
Like in Terminator, there is no fate but what we make.
Yeah. So I've got that. So I think I quote that in I've got a book out at the moment. It just came out about a week ago, called Hot Mess, and in it, it's me sort of trying to talk about climate change using comedy. But I think in the last chapter I use that, and it's near the end, and I'm like, my favorite childhood film, Terminator 2 was right. There is no fate but what you. So it's within our control. We all need to be. We all need to be Sarah Connor. That's what I'm saying. We all need to be
absolutely, which is amazing because she's so awesome.
Yeah, we all just. I mean, with less guns, but more like protesting for climate change or whatever, or working on climate change.
While wearing a vest and just having really toned arms.
Definitely keep the vest, the arms, and the chin ups that she does at the start of the film.
Exactly. I wish I could do that. I can do one. But so we've kind of touched slightly on the effects that can be attributed to climate change. What other things are an effect of climate change that people don't realise? And also, what kind of delights could we look forward to if we don't get our asses in gear?
I mean, there's lots of things that are, I guess, a bit less obvious. I don't think people understand how much it affects health. So health and climate change is something we talk about. So, I think we've seen with COVID that it's often older people, the more vulnerable in society, who are susceptible to disease and stuff. And it's those people that will be more affected by climate change. So things like changes in the range of where mosquitoes can go, because it's warmer now in certain areas, so they can move.
It's why there are false widows in Islington.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't like it.
Yeah, I've seen spiders.
It's like arachnophobia in my house.
100%. I've seen spiders in the UK, in London, over the last few years that I'd never seen before. Things like this just scare the shit out of you. That's a weird thing. And then you get the seasons are coming earlier, so winter's coming earlier. I've started getting hay fever like
Yeah.
on my birthday, which is like the end of February. I've never had hay fever on my birthday before, like my whole entire life. And in the last like year, I was like, I went to the scan of my son a couple of years ago when we were having a baby, and the scan was on my birthday, and I just remember sneezing all the time at this at the scan, seeing him on the screen and being like, what? And I was thinking about climate change at the time. I was like thinking, this is, I mean, it's a really small, obviously kind of seen as a first world problem, but it's, but that is obviously a much kind of less harmful version of it. But it's take that and apply it to other issues that will really impact people. I think the confusing thing sometimes is like it's getting warmer, but there's going to be more floods because, and which sounds a little bit contradictory, but basically because it's warmer, there's more evaporation, so more of the water goes into, is stored or held in the clouds. So for every kind of degree we warm, you get about 7% more rainfall. So as we warm more and more and more, the when it does rain, it's much more intense. And then that obviously means, well, how are things designed to deal with that?
Well, because we're really not, though, because think about was it only a few months ago, there were those floods in, again, I'm talking about London, but in Stratford, and actually a little bit in Islington, just kind of bits of North London and West London, and everything just came to a standstill. You couldn't get into a station in Stratford because there was water up to the steps. Like, I mean, when I say steps, it's like really far down. If you were standing there as a person, the water would be over your head. It was insane.
Mad.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that's just, there's so many different aspects of climate change that will impact us and that will impact different people's lives. It's really hard to kind of get all of that across, whether it's, but I think it will impact every single person's life in some way or another, and some might not seem as serious, but I bet there's something that you care about, that you like doing, whatever, that will be impacted by it adversely, that you'll be like, well, I wish that this wasn't happening, happening.
Absolutely. I'd like to enjoy my house more if there were less spiders in it.
Exactly.
That much.
I don't even clean my windows anymore because I'm too afraid to touch them because of the spiders.
So we use the term like climate change.
Yeah.
Is climate crisis a better term for people to really understand it? Because change can be good, or change can be it just doesn't feel as bad.
I think a lot of some newspapers as well have changed their what they call it, whether it's climate emergency or climate crisis. It makes more sense because that's what it is. Climate change is scientifically accurate. You get lots of different, you can have natural climate change, which does occur. You have what we have now, which is the majority of it, or if not more than all of it, is man-made climate change. But what we're talking about is the climate emergency, and solving something that is, or a climate crisis that is much more about, I guess, humanizing it. Because again, it feels like, global warming or climate change is that sort of step away where you're like, well, it's the planet, it's not me. Even though I live on the planet, it's not. It's nothing.
Even
to
though
do
this
with
is my
me.
house,
I'm
just gonna let it burn.
Even though I need to breathe this air every day, I'm not going to think about that. It's another thing. Whereas I think climate crisis is much more accurate in terms of what it means for the human race.
Yeah. And like you were saying, it's a humanitarian issue. It's not something else that's happening adjacent to us. It's going to happen, like you were saying, it's putting the faces to it and really understanding the impact it has on people who are genuinely contributing to the least to this crisis.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it is a humanitarian issue because it really, it has to be all of society kind of being like, right, well, we need to move on with this. And it is about how it interconnects with which is something that I don't think was really talked about until in the last couple of years, really, how it interconnects with, poverty in the country, how it interconnects with responsibility for, our historical legacies. So the United States and Europe are responsible for the majority, I think at least about almost half maybe, of
Yeah.
how much we've warmed already. So,
Yeah. My goodness.
I think the UK is about 5% of historical emissions. So that's, and given that we've warmed by about a degree, that's sort of 0.05 of a degree Celsius that the UK has warmed the planet by, pretty much. And so, and that is, while there's a lot of talk now about, developing countries and going forward and how do we solve this, there's also the historical legacy of, well, it's actually been mostly rich Western countries that have caused
People
this harm.
love to make it about developing in air quotes, but I call USA is a developing country. Let's not pretend that it isn't. It's like they're always pointing the fingers. They're not paying attention to the fingers pointing back. But there's always so much emphasis put on developing countries, like even things like the population and all those kind of things. These kind of things are thrown into the mix, and it's like, hold on, they're still emitting less emissions than us. They still haven't done anything. It's about that you can't just keep punching down kind of thing. So
the population,
and it's like ignoring all the companies that are actually the ones that are really polluting the world.
No, you're right, and there's this. Because it's such a big, complex thing to solve, and you do have countries, you do have these big corporations, you do have, and loads of different countries who are all different sizes, who want different things, who are at different stages in their history, who have different numbers of people in the countries, and that will change, and all these other things. So it's really complex. And then you've got the other side of it, which is like, as an individual, what do I do? So it's almost like you're going from thinking about, 7-8 billion people, and then being like, oh, but what can I, what am I doing about this? Or you're thinking about the biggest company in the world or the biggest country in the world, and then you're also like, okay, but what should, how should I, what should I eat today? Or, what should I be driving an electric vehicle, whatever. So it's that sort of like, it's almost the most massive thing in the world, but it's also this thing that's supposed to be really personal as well. And that can be really confusing to people.
Just a little bit.
And really sort of like, one minute you're like, it's all these, there's 100 companies causing this amount. And then at the next minute you're like, well, what can I do about that? And can I do anything about this?
Exactly. It's not like I can rock up and just take down these huge companies. But and also, the part that capitalism has to play in it and everything else, that we're all a part of it, aren't we?
The system that we're in is very much, and so the system has to change. And I think capitalism will live or die this century by whether it manages to solve the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Because it is the opportunity, or it's something that people who believe in capitalism, that is how we should run our societies. They really need to step up to the plate now, and prove that that's how we, that we can solve problems using this, way of thinking. And there'll be other people that think, we can't solve it with that and whatever, and that's fine as well. I'm not taking a side here.
I'm as long as everyone's doing something, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever you're doing, either whatever you believe in, whatever you're doing, as long as you're focused on improving the situation and making sure that it is genuinely improving, then that's a positive thing. And whether that's trying to change the entire system or whether it's working from within the system and trying to move, and I think all of these things are positive. So it's quite a difficult.
I mean, there's a lot going on with it. So like at this point, again, so you touched on what leads into my upcoming questions,
right?
Because obviously it's big and it is small. Yeah. How do we save ourselves at this point? Because we say save the planet, but it really isn't the question of saving the planet, because the planet is just going to be like, that's enough of you guys, and kill us. So it's like, how do we save ourselves? So are the small changes like recycling, meatless Mondays, reusable shopping bags, those kind of things, are they making a difference? What can we do as individuals?
Yeah. And
then we can move on to what we do on the larger scale after.
The rest of it.
Yeah.
So my way of trying to think about this is that it depends on who you are, and therefore what you do. So not everybody's the same. Everybody has a different level of, I guess, responsibility. But again, so even thinking about it from a UK perspective, the average emissions per person in the UK is about 7 tons, which is quite a lot a year.
Yeah.
I think the global average is something like 4 tons, and we need to reduce that to about 2 tons, which I think is about roughly the average that India maybe is at the moment or something like that. Anyway, so that's all the emissions that are caused in the UK divided by the number of people in the country, if you know what I mean. But within that, there's going to be a massive range, isn't there? You're going to have some people who are below that line, and therefore what I would say is what they do is not an issue.
Yeah.
Because there's also, it's whether the things that you do that contribute to climate change. So as you're saying, meat-free Mondays, or I can't remember what were the other examples, not plastic bags or whatever, and other things.
Yeah, recycling, just the general
yeah.
things.
Yes, so recycling, reusing things, meat-free Mondays, all these sort of things that are sort of seen as what can we do about this? A lot of them are quite small things, so recycling is really doesn't contribute a huge amount to emissions. I think one rough calculation showed that if you did all of your recycling for roughly about 5 years, that's the same equivalent emissions as one return flight from London to New York.
Oh, wow.
So, what we focus on there is quite important.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are at the sort of lower end of the income spectrum and you're spending most of your money on electricity and heating for your home that cause, and driving to your job, maybe in your car. So that probably takes up a lot of your carbon footprint, is like driving to your job and powering your house and your electricity. And if you're sort of on a low income and that's what your climate carbon footprint or whatever is, you don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
You need to go out there and, if you can, fight for change and try and change the system and stuff. But you're, as a person, whatever, like, it's not important. You are not the problem. If, on the other hand, your income is much higher and you're taking return flights to New York 4 times a year, and you'd probably, you're spending money on luxury things that you don't actually need. Now, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't tell people, like, you shouldn't be doing this or you can't do this. But as an individual, you should look at your lifestyle. If you are kind of above average income and probably above average sort of climate impact, then yeah, you should look at yourself.
Yeah.
And what your decisions are, and maybe make some changes if you feel comfortable making those changes. And if you are, I don't know, an influencer or a celebrity, what you do and the type of tone you set on climate change is what other people will aspire to as well. And so you are influencing, and you're probably, from a climate perspective, negatively influencing consumption. But your job is probably based on selling shit that nobody needs on Instagram.
Yeah.
But there's it's complicated again, but it probably does come back to sort of, again, that balance between not everybody's the same. Different people are impacted by it more.
Yeah.
So again, those people who are probably contributing more as an individual towards climate change are also the people that can probably, protect themselves from the impacts of climate change more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, it's that weird inequality where you've got, well, these people causing it, are harming other people that can't, do as much about it, but they're not going to change what they do because that, it's not going to affect them.
They can literally
so much.
Insulate themselves from the effects of it, can't
exactly.
they?
And so it's more to them, it's like a bigger deal to change their lifestyle, their personality, to change, the impact on them would be, oh, my friends think I'm a bit weird because I've decided to, not go on holiday to Mauritius every year or something like that. Whatever it is, they've gone a bit weird because they've gone really, into this climate thing or whatever, and that's more of a, for some people, maybe more of an effect on their life than some of the impacts of climate change will ever be. but you have a responsibility, you know, as an individual to be aware that this is what you're causing and who you're impacting and the role that you're playing in this. So keep doing meat-free Mondays. That's what I'm saying. Just keep doing it. Yeah. Go for it. Keep recycling. Do everything. Everything's important. And if you are, you know, if everybody can do different things and what you might do might not be as much as what other people can do. The other thing to say on this that's really important is to expand what we mean by what can I as an individual do about climate change. We need to understand what are the bigger things.
We're not limited to that at all.
Exactly. So the bigger things are, as an individual, driving causes a lot of it. So how much we drive, whether we need to be taking trips to places, transport in general. So flying is a massive one. But there's other things. So changing where you bank and where your pensions are is incredibly important.
Okay.
So changing them to places that don't invest in fossil fuels, and saying to your bank, well, I want to bank somewhere that's ethical. In the sense that, and it doesn't invest in things. There are banks out there that do that. And you can look up, there's a few things on the internet, I can't remember off the top of my head what they are.
Yeah.
But if you look up, you know, how green is my bank, essentially, whatever, there'll be little things where you can type in who you're with and check. So that then sends a signal saying, well, I care about what my money's used for. And then people and banks will start making decisions differently based on that. Yeah.
I suppose much like recycling, I know that recycling, you say, because it's recycling our own things, it's making a small impact, but it's a good, nevertheless, let's crack on with it.
Yeah.
I feel like in turn, retail has to kind of answer the call of that as well. And then it kind of then mushrooms up, I guess. And
Yeah. No, exactly. A lot of these things are going to start from a ground up.
Yeah.
Waiting on companies, waiting on governments to change.
Yeah, it doesn't happen without pressure.
Exactly.
We've got a V for vendetta, these people.
100%.
Yeah.
We need to all go out with Greta masks on and just like
exactly, and just terrorise the MPs.
Standing around Westminster all with Greta Thunberg masks on.
Just looking really disapproving.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm trying to think who else would be on a mask.
There are so many, but like I love the way that Gen Z like popping through, just like, stop now, guys. Seriously, old people, stop it. That's what I feel like they're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So banking is one thing, and what your pensions are invested in. What else? Voting is obviously incredibly important. What you do at your job is important. So whether your career is guided towards working on climate change, or just whether at your work there's like a sustainability committee, and if not, set one up, or force your colleague to set one up because you don't want to do it, or whatever. You know, there's ways of doing stuff in kind of all of the aspects of our life. So whether that's our kind of personal life, and I think that's the one that people think about the most. It's like, oh, in my house, we, switch off the lights in the rooms or whatever. Like, that's one aspect of your life, but you spend a lot of the rest of your life at the company that you work for. So what is that company doing, and how can you influence that company to change their practices from within and say, well, as an employee, this is something I care about. I think we should be doing things differently. And practices within jobs. How do you make it more sustainable? Do travel or whatever within jobs, the types of meals that get served at work events, there's stuff there that again is incredibly important. Yeah. And then there's the sort of, the political side, who you vote for, whether you're protesting, whether you set up groups. There's been a lot of, pressure with groups over the last couple of years, which I think has been really positive, with the school strikes and the Extinction Rebellion stuff, which I think, I think people will disagree with different aspects of it. Yeah. But the point is that they're effective. And if you don't like that, it's the answer isn't to say, I don't like that, and then do nothing. The answer is to go and set up your own group that does the thing that you think should be being done. Yeah. Just being active and participating in this is the way that it's going to get solved, and having all these different voices is the most important way to do it. And what the main thing I think that's missing, that I tried to talk about in the book a little bit, is community. So at that kind of community level, or, you know, I've spoken to occasionally like church groups and stuff like that as well. That's the missing link, because it's seen as this, like, it's either governments need to be sorting it out or I need to be changing, you know, my diet or get solar panels. And there's something in the middle between the government, you know, putting in a carbon tax and you getting solar panels in your house. There's something in between that that could probably really feel quite good, because it's something in your community that you see that's happening on your doorstep, but that isn't just you doing it.
And there's something you said earlier as well about the conversations and things. How do we actually have these types of conversations with people in order to spark change? How do we get that going so we can kind of be that influential person?
Yeah, I mean, I think listening to people is really important. So just asking people questions about what's important to them, finding out, you know, making connections with people, and then talking about what's important to you and why climate change is important to you. And it really has to be a conversation that's not preachy, which is one reason that I think I've had some success doing comedy about climate change, because you really sort of bring yourself back down to people's level and be self-deprecating, and so it doesn't feel as anywhere near as preachy when you're talking. Yeah. So it's important to be on the same level as the person that you're having a conversation with, and not be like, well, they don't know as much as me. Yeah. Or their views are, you know, you're not going to persuade someone by telling them that, you know, they're an idiot. Yeah. So it's about having conversations about, you know, why it's personalizing it as well, I think is the other thing. So it's like, it's easy to talk about, oh, there's going to be more of these, you know, whatever floods, and, you know, I'm really worried about this, these people far away. And I think that's important, but often talking about things that are within other people, you know, how those other people will be affected, whoever you're talking to, how will they be affected, and talking about that, then they'll actually make much more of a connection. But also letting people come to it by themselves. Yeah. And so telling stories, I think, is a really good way of doing it. We do need more films like 2012. We do.
Where's John Cusack? Him and his Or The Rock. Oh my gosh, do it with The Rock in. There we go. I think we have just sold it. The Rock or Will Smith or I don't know, Halle Berry. 100%. I love Halle Berry. I don't know, just some cool. The Avengers. I don't know. Just let them do it.
It needs to be big climate change stuff. Yeah. There's a really good documentary that is on the iPlayer at the moment, BBC iPlayer at the moment, that I would really recommend, called The People versus Climate Change. And it's about a climate assembly that happened recently. So the government basically chose something like, I don't know, it was like roughly 100 random members of the public to go for 4 weekends to learn about climate change and then to give their recommendations about what we should do about climate change.
How interesting.
The documentary's one of the most wonderful things. And I know... So I know the people that made it, and I was kind of like, oh, you know, I think this will be good or whatever, but I didn't really, and then I actually saw it, and it was one of those ones where, like, you know, the people that made it, and you're actually like, you've done like an incredible job here. The
concept sounds really good.
Yeah, it's great. So you're following like these normal people learning about climate change and why it's important to their lives, and that's how you get change. You get people to go on a journey about why it's important to them. Yeah. And if you can't take people on that journey, then you should show people who are like them going on that journey. Yeah. Because they'll be like, oh, well, that's like me. I see myself as that person, and they've gone on this journey. Maybe you know, this is important to me as well. Yeah. So yeah, those are the kind of things that we need to do. And give people different options, and get people to make, you know, people would like, I think I talk about this briefly in my book as well, like people would like a really simple answer. They'd like me to say like, oh, you need to eat more beans and we will solve climate change.
Yeah.
And that's it. They want something like really
They're like, brilliant, doing it, that's fine.
And they're like, great, I'll do that.
Yeah.
They just want like a list. I want it. Here's the 5 things you need to do. And if you do these, that's fine. And the actual answer is like, it's so complicated and messy that you need to find what you're best at doing.
Yes, absolutely. Before we wrap up, and you've been such an amazing guest and I've learned so much today. Who or what is the biggest contributor to the climate crisis? So who's on our hit list? Who are we going after? Big fossil fuel.
Like, I mean, really, it is big fossil fuel who they've caused a lot of problems by intentionally delaying us taking action on this. So I like to sort of see, so if we go back 30 years, right, we've got the end. I'm about 36 now. I'm trying to remember, but basically
you forget after a certain time, don't
you? I know.
You?
Yeah, you're just like, I'm somewhere in that
some
range.
point I was born. Yeah,
I remember when I was born.
Yeah,
sometimes I remember what year it is now. I know roughly what, I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
That's it. Anyway, but if we go back 30 years to sort of the late 80s, so say roughly 1990, that was like the beginning of the modern general public understanding of climate change.
Yeah.
And that it was happening. And very little has happened over that 30 years. Okay. Maybe more so in the last 10 years. And we have basically another 30 years before we're fucked, essentially. And I don't mean we can,
which isn't very long.
No, and I don't. And that's the point. Is like, it's not like we can wait another 30 years. It's that it has to be now solved in the next 30 years. Not so that half the time that we've wasted essentially so far, a lot of what we've wasted, a fair amount of that has come down to fossil fuel companies and others with what I'd call vested interests, not just them, but others who have a stake in continuing the society the way it was. They've done a lot of damage. Yeah, because they're just like, but I like making money. Yeah, I've got so much of it, but I want some more. And that's what a lot of society's problems come down to. People who have power and money don't want to give it up, and don't like change. So they aren't great. But then again, I probably have to answer this boringly and say who's to blame. It depends on what you're talking about. So is it countries? What countries the most to blame? Is it companies? What companies are most to blame? Is it individuals? What individuals are the most to, like, again, you can look at this on so many different levels. And I don't, blame is only so important. But you're right, we do. There's who do we go after? What do we change now? That's the important thing. And I think there is an element of understanding where how have we got to where we are and who's to blame for where we are now. But it's very much, well, who's standing in the way now? Yes, and who needs to be moved out of the way? Yeah, and that's basically anyone who isn't willing to change fairly rapidly over the next 30 years. Yeah. So that is, I mean, I'm not going to name names. Oh no, I just meant just in terms of like I was saying, that's why I said like fossil fuel as opposed to naming, like, I don't know, Starbucks like, or something. His name's John Smith and he lives down the road from me and he's the one, whatever. People are the problem and people are the solution, but some people are much more of a problem. Yeah. And some people are much more of a solution. And, countries are run by people and companies are run by people. So it is human action here. So we need to do something about it and we need to do something about it quickly. And anyone that's sort of standing in the way of that, yes, we need to debate what we do. Yeah. But anyone that's sort of saying, well, maybe we shouldn't do anything, need to be, just sort of laughed aside at this stage. Yeah. It's anyone that says that is just selfish. It's like, look, Mr. Whatever your face is. I know you're 85 years old and still for some reason have too much power. I know you're going to die in a minute, but come on, what about your children or grandchildren? They don't give a shit.
Do they? It's such a shame.
They're just like, well, if I can pass on my money to my children or my grandchildren,
that will insulate them from the entire planet being on fire. Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, but well, thank you so much again. Where would you like to be found online, and where can people learn more about saving the planet from you?
My website is mattwinning.com. I'm on Twitter @mattwinning. I'm on Instagram. Not that, because I couldn't get it, so I am mattywin85, which is quite complicated, but it was I don't know, it's like one of those ones where you've got it on Hotmail for like when you were like 15 and you're still like,
yes,
like it's just I'm like, it's going to take me too much time to change this now. I'm just going to keep going with this for the rest of this stupid thing for the rest of my life. So you can find me there, and you can buy my book, which is out now in all good shops. I would recommend going on bookshop.org and search for Hot Mess by Matt Winning. But you can get it in, all your Waterstones, your foils. You can get it on Audible. You can get it in all the places that you would normally get a book. You can absolutely get it. So yeah, go and buy that. That would be wonderful. And it's kind of, me talking about climate change and becoming a new dad. And there's lots of jokes. And as far as I'm aware, it's the first sort of comedy book about climate change. Maybe there are other ones, but I don't really know.
No, that's cool. I mean, like, let's say it's the first one. That's it. I
think so. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. So
pioneer. You're a pioneer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's always white men, isn't it?
Exactly. Pioneers. Oh my gosh. But you're the fun kind though, not the kind that brings smallpox in a blanket.
Yeah. I'll try not. I don't know if there's any smallpox in the books. I can't, say for sure whether who's touched it or whatever. But I'm going to try not to do that. But yeah. Check me out, Twitter and website, and I've got a tour coming out next year, probably April and May, so 2022. So go and check that out on my website. I think they're on sale like in about a week time. I'm going to do more of my own podcast at some point, but I've not got around to do that. I'm doing other people, like I'm coming on. When people are like, could you come on my podcast? I'm like, that means I don't have to do my own podcast. That'd be great. So it's a lot easier. So I'm going to keep riding this whole podcast wave for a little while, and then I'll start doing my own again at some point. But
that's fair enough.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, co-workers, strangers in the street. To find out more about us, including our upcoming events, head over to Instagram, instagram.com/speakon_. Bye!